Katie's going to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, so just to put some of the business and NGO people in context for you that we've had over the last couple of days, okay? We've tried to put a mix together of the kind of companies, people, social enterprises, social business that we feel would be interesting for you so that you look at different models. And you've seen lots. If you've been paying attention from the beginning, you've seen all kinds of things and all kinds of leaders in their field trying to explain how they're trying to make the world a better place. It's for you to judge if they're doing well or not. We are not judging them. What we know is they wanted to come here to speak to you. We've said to you, get to the mics for your questions. I know there's no time. Do tweet, do blog, but I do want to remind you, the conference is live streamed, okay? So the conference, the summit, is in the public domain, right? Do you understand? Is there anyone who doesn't understand what that means? Okay? It's in the public domain. So what the people stand up here, me, David, anybody else, and say, for the public record, what you question, for the public record. Got it? Got it? Yeah, yeah, good. Okay, so I want to introduce you to a company that I discovered during the last year when David has been working on his book and looking very closely at the role of business in society and also the role that social media is playing on changing business for good. It's very much a David thing. And this was one of the companies we came across. It's called E&Co. They've invested, listen to the model, okay? They've invested in more than 200 enterprises and mobilized $250 million in capital. And these enterprises provide modern energy to over 8 million people. They've recently won the Future Energy Award. Now, Philip, who you're going to meet in a moment, has responsibility for the World Trade Center, which is a network of trade development offices. Trade development offices, developing countries, listen up, okay? And a portfolio of industrial development and waste-to-energy projects. So where you're using waste to get the energy you need. He teaches also on energy and development at Columbia University School of International Public Affairs. And I've asked Philip if he would keep his speech to you as short as possible so you get the time on the mics. Okay? Anyone who didn't get out of bed this morning, don't go to the mic. You wasted 20 minutes this morning. Okay? So, please welcome Philip LaRocco from E&Co.
I've been tasked to catch up on all the time that's been allocated, but let's start with one thing. Hans, you're fabulous. The point he made about joy is absolutely seminal and crucial to anything you're going to do. If you're not going to get some joy out of it, don't bother doing it. If you're not going to feel joy about what you're doing, don't bother. Now, I've been asked to compress my yakking time, and I will, so that we can have a couple of minutes for questions. But I realized you've all been sitting now for a while. So I'm going to play a video, which I wasn't going to use. And during that video, stand up, stretch, do whatever you want. You can ignore the video. By the way, at the end of the video, there's about 8 seconds of an E&Co commercial. Ignore that. Okay? So if I can cue the video to wherever one does that, there we go.
And it starts like this. We crave to be kissed by a moment complete in its happiness. Far away from the things that we wish to escape, that lead us to think that we are not awake. We are ourselves. Despite ourselves, this place gets smaller as the universe swells. We come to terms, eventually. I am not the only cowboy in this one-horse metaphor. And I am not the only lifeguard who's washed up on the shore. Wake me up, take me out, calm me down when I'm in doubt, and I'm in doubt every day. And it starts like this. 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 Cradled and kissed by a moment complete in its happiness. We are ourselves. Eventually, eventually, eventually. I am not the only cowboy in this one-horse metaphor.
When I was 12 years old, I was taught by a lifeguard who was trying to teach me how to swim. By the way, I never learned how to swim until I was 24. But I remember something he said, and I've used it. And what he said very simply is, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I don't know if he invented that expression, but since I was 12 years old, it was somewhere in a Jurassic period that it actually happened. And my colleagues and I have been working for the last 20 years preparing something to put before your group. Now, I just want to correct my biography. It was from 1970 until 1990 I worked at the World Trade Center in New York and ran those development offices. Since 1990, my colleagues and I have only worked on energy poverty. And we've been fortunate enough to invest in 200 developing country enterprises that do, as the introduction said, deliver modern energy now to 8 million people. And we've got awards. We've gotten pieces of glass, we've got pearls, and I have an actual replica of, I think, a 16th century Italian gold lira because of the 8 million people that are now served. But those 8 million people, combined with the efforts of everybody else in this space, probably equals 20 million people that's been done by social enterprises. That's 1% of the problem. So we don't take any victory laps, you know? And this morning you spoke of 7 of the 8 Millennium Development Goals. They're on the right there. And I've heard it said there's the invisible, we need an additional Millennium Goal, number 9 or number 10, number 11. I think we heard housing a little while ago. Well, if that's the case, energy is the invisible Millennium Development Goal. Because I challenge you, as a group, to go through any of these first 7 goals and tell me which one can be accomplished without the eradication of energy poverty. And the answer is none. put a little context. There's two little boys in there reading by a light. Compare that to what we think is the extent of energy poverty. The Archbishop very nicely said that he didn't comprehend trillions. I certainly don't comprehend trillions either. I have a little trouble with billions. But I'll leave you with a number to work with, plus or minus 5%. There are 500 million households in the world who live in energy poverty. Energy poverty equals lack of modern lighting, lack of any electricity, and cooking with dirty, dangerous fuels. 500 million households where you cannot plug those cute little devices you're twittering on right now at all. What would happen to you in 36 hours if you were trapped? It would be an awesome event to actually watch. I'm part of that demographic that Hans so nicely said still has some energy, even though they have one foot in the grave and another foot on a banana peel. So this slide, what do I want to do now? I'm going to give you a problem in a bit. Before that, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of people. The problem is large. It requires your intelligence. It requires your age. It requires this whole media frantic thing that you're all engaged in. So just think about that for a second. First, anybody here from the Philippines? Whoa, right in front. I'm in one part of what I'm going to introduce, I may ask you to explain to your brothers and sisters here what the Ramon Magsaysay Award is. Could I impose on you to do that? Okay, that'll be in a few minutes. I want to introduce you, I'm going to cut this a little short because I would have introduced you to 7 or 8 groups, but I want to talk to you for a shorter period of time, and then I want to try and address some questions. Next, it says. Okay. Gentleman on the left, that's Harish Hande. Anyone know him? Fabulous human being. On the right, you see a flower market. I believe it's in Gujarat. Harish runs a company called Selco India. Now, Selco now serves over 100,000 customers. It's probably 200,000 customers. And Harish has an interesting perspective, and I've listened to all of your comments in the prior session, especially the ones that contain an awful lot of light and heat. And he has a particular perspective that I would pass along. He should actually be here, by the way, but I'll explain why he's not in a minute. His perspective is there isn't a human being on this planet that his company can't figure out how to make an affordable product for. None of this, oh, well, it's unaffordable to that last 10% or the last 15%. You speak to Harish, he goes, that's utter nonsense. So what have they done over the years? For example, flower sellers in these markets typically use the kerosene lamp. Have any of you done any reading or working? I hope you haven't done any tweeting by a kerosene lamp. What's its characteristic? Orange and black, would you say? Yeah. Dirty. Its smoke has an interesting medicinal side benefit. Sometimes it helps kill off mosquitoes, but other than that, it is an incredibly dangerous, dirty, lung-infecting entity. It's also not the way you want to show off your flowers if you happen to be a flower market vendor, because you have a nice orange glow rather than a compact fluorescent light here showing off. Someone I know out here can tell me what that little pinkish group of flowers are. So Harish came up with the idea of creating micro-entrepreneurs who would charge batteries during the day. In the evening, they would rent the batteries to the markets and the people in the markets, and they would rent them for less than the cost of the kerosene that they were using previously. So not only do the flower markets now be able to show off their products more attractively and sell more of it, they would also create a new chain of businesses. So the market itself, or the individual in the market, the vendor, has to buy a compact fluorescent light and a wire. And then every day, they rent a solar-charged battery for less than the cost of the kerosene that would have been purchased to show off their product badly. That's one of their innovations. There's probably 50 different innovations. The one I like the best is the idea of a solar headlamp, like a miner's light, and the market for that, again on a rental basis, was midwives and rose pickers, people who work in the dark and were cleaning up roses so that they can be brought to that market. So they rent a little headlamp so they can see things. Now, if I may ask you to turn on the mic, and if I may ask you to identify yourself and tell the folks what the award is.
Good morning, everyone. My name is RJ Sustigaram from the Philippines. The award is called Ramon Magsaysay Award. It's an award given to, I think, Asians. Mm-hmm. This is the Asian version of the Nobel Prize. So, yeah, so they give it to distinguished individuals who have shown exemplary achievements in various disciplines, including, I guess, this one.
The reason Harish, who is far more interesting than I will ever be, is not here is because 2 days ago he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Asia in the Philippines. I would suggest you look at selcoindia.com, as well as they also have a learning lab and an innovation center. I suggest you track it down. And that's what I'm going to do a lot of rather than trying to explain these things. Quick trip. Okay, let me hear from Ghana. Nope. Well, one? Okay, all right. This is Clara. She lives in Accra, capital of Ghana. Clara had an idea, probably like a number of the ideas that were looked at this morning. Her idea was very simple. She realized that her neighbors were using excessive amounts of charcoal for their cooking. And she had this idea that if she could make little canisters of liquid petroleum gas, she could then go sell them to her neighbors. She had worked for 20 years in a bank up to that point. And when she went to get a loan for her business, what do you think was the reaction from the banking community? We don't know you. You don't have any track record. You don't have any collateral. What the hell do you mean you don't know her? Clara not only started that small firm, which is called M38, so you can figure out what year, how old she was when she started the firm. She now owns that whole entire filling station that's in the background. Now, LPG is not the greatest fuel in the world from an environmental perspective, and I know that's an explanatory. But let's understand something. If you're cooking with charcoal indoors, or you're cooking indoors with wood or any other form of biomass, LPG is a gift from the gods. Cheaper, more efficient, cleaner, less dangerous. So one of the things when I get around to blogging, which I haven't done in more than a year, I actually blog under the name of Dark Green Geek. Green because this is a financing business, dark green because this is part of the environmental perspective I bring to it, and geek because it better be driven by facts, not good intentions. I don't know, in case you think everything we talk about or invest in is little. This is a 13 megawatt, somebody out here must speak megawatts, right? 13 megawatt small hydro facility in, and I expect a shout out here, Honduras. All right, I'm from Honduras, I don't know. Nobody here from Honduras? This is La Esperanza. And it's a typical small hydro project that you might see. Ah, she's backstage, there we go. Ah, fantastic. Well, remember to remind her that she's done terrific. La Esperanza echoes something that Hans said earlier. This is now a 13 megawatt project, but it started as a 400 kilowatt project because the promoters of it happened to be a Canadian who transplanted himself to Honduras, could not raise the financing for a $13 million project if he had stood on his head for 400 years. What he did, his name is Ron, what he did was he broke the project into successive pieces. Now, our little entity was able to finance that first piece. We couldn't have financed $13 million for a 13 megawatt project, but we could finance that first piece. So Hans made that point. Take your vision, break it down into its pieces. Very quickly, that's Rin Seha in Cambodia. You wonder about where business ideas come from for social businesses and for for-profit businesses. Well, small rice mills in Cambodia, about 60–70% of their cost is the fuel oil to run the rice mill. Then they produce rice husks. The idea here was to use those rice husks and replace 65% of the fuel oil that was being used through a very simple process called gasification. And SME-RE is a spin-off from an NGO called SME Cambodia, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. They basically developed a relationship with E&Co and with a supplier of this equipment. And they've now done this like 30 or 40 times with small rice millers. Now, the thing about rice millers in Cambodia that you need to understand is they really are family businesses. There might be 2 or 3 people involved. So is Cambodia here? Ah, yes! Drop by and say hello to Rin Seha. All right, I'm going to end here. I'm going to jump from here to my problem that I want you to solve. Gentleman up in the left-hand corner, that's Suraj. The man standing next to him is Ernest. Now, all I can tell you about Suraj, that's Ghana again, by the way, is this man is the Henry Ford of cook stoves. He went to a training course that taught him diligently how to take virgin metal and all the different pieces and produce a modern cook stove. Cook stoves that are very popular in Kenya. I learned when I was in Kenya that the Thais actually claim that they invented the Jiko stove, so it's a whole complicated 55,000-year history, I think, about who owns the stove. These two gentlemen broke that process into parts. And so they went to work with the scrap metal people, and they went to work with the unemployed youth, and they atomized the production, whereas the trainers taught them, oh, you do this, then you do that, then you're like one person building a Volvo. And they said, whoa, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work with the people who collect sheet metal. I'm going to pay them. I'll give them the tools. I'll teach them how to create the frame for this, and I'll pay them on a daily basis. This way they have daily disposable income, one of the things you keep hearing about. And if Harish were here, one of the things he would pass along, which is appropriate at that point, is remember that 10 rupees a day is not the same as 300 rupees a month. Now that sounds a little strange for anyone who living in a different world, but 10 rupees a day is what you need to manage if you're poor, not 300 rupees a month. And that's the atomization that has to take place. There are more slides here, but you'll get to see the presentation. We're in Tanzania. Shout out for Tanzania. There's a mob here from Tanzania. This is Zarasola. Yes. Thank you. Here's the question I want to ask you. That's in Bolivia. You can read all these on the INCO website. There's videos, number 1. Number 2, you go to Ashton Awards. They have a great number of case studies for you to pursue. All right, so here's the question that I want to ask you. 1% can be done with this methodology. The reason that only 1% can be done with this methodology is it's a very high-touch business. Do you know what I mean by that? It means that E&Co staff and local staff working with these entrepreneurs, it's face-to-face. It's one-on-one business. If you want to solve energy poverty, your issue is not doing 40 enterprises a year, but doing 4,000 enterprises a year. So I want to put before you that we've spent 20 years preparing ourselves to know what it is that works. So let's pretend we're dealing with a disease. Energy poverty is a disease. And let's pretend that E&Co in 20 years, what we've done is we've produced a formula, an inoculation, to correct it. Our problem is we need to now move that out of the laboratory, 200, and we need to move it into what we're hoping is a connected distance learning activity. That wannabe entrepreneurs, would-be entrepreneurs, people like Suraj, would go to a website, and in that website, they would initially be given free information about all of these social businesses. We have 200 case studies and probably another 800 to work from. They would then begin a course of self-study, and after a course of self-study, they would then become mentored, mostly long distance, perhaps some face-to-face time.
Go to questions, Phil.
I have to finish the point to go to questions, Kate. I have a question for them. And then they would be connected to investment. Okay, so my request to you all is, how would you do this? And in that context, if you want to ask questions about social enterprises, I'd be thrilled. I'd be especially thrilled if I can figure out what I did with the microphone. Ah, there it is. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and one of your colleagues will deliver the microphone. Does anybody have any questions on the business model? Mr. Osaka here.
It's not a question, it's a really quick comment. Can we, unlike the past two other sessions, can we, one person ask a question, stand up, all right. Can someone ask a question and then have it answered rather than a quantity of questions?
That's my plan.
And then, is it?
Yes.
Okay, cool, just making sure.
Okay, we've got 11 minutes left in the session. So when you go back to Phil for his answer,
Right.
yeah, Phil has to be able to answer,
Sure.
and then someone
Okay,
else
I was just
doesn't
saying
get to the
quality
mic.
rather than
Yeah?
quantity, but.
All right, the deal here is I'll try and give a quick answer to quick questions immediately. And at lunchtime, I'll hang out in some place, but have a sandwich, and let's get all those questions, all right? I've been here for 3 days, so I think I can figure it out.
First question is here.
Okay, it's not more of a question, but it's something that we're doing, and I'm glad someone's raised energy poverty here. We're doing a 5-phase rural development plan in India called Project Chirag.
Yeah.
And the gentleman Harish has also been involved at some level.
Yes.
What we realized was there was we listed out problems, but there was no light. We went to a village, we said, okay, this is, there are about 20 odd problems, but the cause is there's no light. No one can do anything without light. So we work with NGOs that make solar panels. We take students who then, from different colleges who get involved, go to villages, install these, and then after 6 months, they go and check with those villagers, give them knowledge about it, because at the end of the day, what's missing in India right now is follow-up. People are ready to put money, but there's no one following up. And 2 years later, we actually changed the battery for minimum cost. Not going to take too long. Okay. So that's something that we're trying to now replicate in other countries. Mm-hmm. If there's, like I was talking to a few delegates earlier about Africa.
Where should people go to get information about it? What's the website?
It's called projectchirag.com.
Spell it out for folks.
PROJECTCHIRAG.com. And I'm around if you guys have any questions, if you guys need any help, we're free to help. We've got knowledge partners who will share every information. So, yeah.
Okay, and our website is eandco.net. There's a whole set of videos on there. And I mentioned before Ashton Awards, ASHDEN. And it's an enormous amount of information. We also, in a Columbia University setting, have developed a wiki space that is really not much of a wiki space or a Facebook page. It's much more of a garage full of information that we can share.
My name is Scott from Zambia. I just want to ask, concerning the energy that you're talking about, most of the corporations, what they're doing in Africa is that they're getting, say, there's sugarcane and converting them to energy. So in your case, what do you think is more important, the food part of a sugarcane or the energy? Or where's the balance between these two? Thank you.
Excellent question. A straightforward answer, the food part. There are numerous alternatives to produce kilocalories that can produce heat and light and electricity. There are only a select number of variables that you can manage to produce kilocalories that human beings can consume. End of, full stop. And I know it's a complicated, gnarly issue, particularly with biofuels, but there are many, many different scales of this to look at. And there are many, many situations where you don't have to make that trade-off. But there's many that you shouldn't. Thank you for the question.
Hello, I'm Manuel from Mexico, and I completely agree with my colleague from India about the follow-up programs. We have a very similar program in Mexico, so maybe we can get together for lunch. But my question is really, how do you manage the fine line between a social enterprise and a nonprofit? Because sometimes all the follow-up programs represent extra costs, which have to either pass on to the consumer or be financed by a foundation. So my opinion is once you get cross that line, you have to enter microfinance and access to credit.
Yes.
So I would like you to talk a little bit about that line and how credits have to be managed in order for that to be a sustainable business and a sustainable project as well.
That's a brilliant question, and in motor-mouth fashion, I will answer it in 40 seconds, but then we should follow up with discussing it. I'm going to give you a quick PhD on the business of E&Co, the business model. In dollar terms, energy enterprises can afford to repay the principal, as you heard this morning, and about 10%. Not 25%. This is not venture capital returns. Those businesses, if you give them 5 or 7 years, can take that capital from you, they can repay it, and they can repay about a 10% interest. The costs that Manuel just mentioned actually drive that 10% return down to about 2%. So E&Co is a financially self-supporting entity. That's not to be confused with a charity, which gives its money away, or a venture fund that's looking for double-digit returns. And that's if there's one point I'd like you to come away from the model perspective here, is you can't have this conversation about capitalism in that form of the business and government in that form of the intervention. That is 20% of the space. The 80% of the space is where the public interest and the private interest are messing around and merging. Think of a shopping center. Nothing more commercial in the world. Yet very often, the government in that region builds the roads and installs the utilities for that. So is that a purely private venture? Absolutely not. It's a public-private venture. And the whole tax debate, the whole what should the level be, that's a question of balance and proportionality.
Shia was the next question.
Shia.
It's Dia, not Shia.
Dia.
Hi, I'm from Bangladesh. It's not a question, more of a concern that while solar panel is really exciting and stuff, it's also extremely expensive. And countries like Bangladesh can't afford to really set it up, although we have a lot of sunlight. That's one concern, and what other alternate technologies there is to sort of create light. And the next is that it's more of an idea that I found, I think it's really interesting, that I found a professor who was able to create pure drinking water using a bowl and a bit of hay. And that took less than $5 for him to do. So if there were more ideas like that would come up, that would be really exciting, really great.
On the first part of your question, I mean, Grameen Shakti and BRAC have both tried to drive the cost of the individual solar unit to its affordability. But affordability for solar should not be compared to affordability to plug in your hairdryer in Dhaka, okay? Affordability is what's the alternative that people are doing. And solar can nail a price point that's competitive with kerosene.
Maureen from Uganda.
Thank you very much. Mine is a question. Do you have statistics of companies or organizations that deal in this kind of work? Because the lack of electricity or inadequate electricity or power is not a problem for only people in rural areas. We in urban areas do suffer from load shedding too. And for a digital native like me, it's just so frustrating. So it would be very important to know like companies that do this in our various regions or countries. Thank you.
You should look at one of the slides I didn't show you has the word energy poverty here and energy waste here, and the word opportunity between it. Because inefficient urban systems are just as much of a dilemma and just as much of an opportunity to create a business around as rural energy having zero as their base. One of the slides up there showed in Thailand, a company called KWTE. Wow. That's pretty impressive. The stuff that looks like gunk over here, that black gunk, that's 18 inches of methane. All right, that was coming out of a cassava processing plant that was making tapioca. Small company came to them and said, can we get that? What we will do, all we want is, we need all of your waste stream, and then we want you to buy back the energy we're going to produce. That company, KWTE, all right, displaced 34 million liters of fuel oil. It's the most profitable investment we ever made. And just as people who talk to you about profitable investments, it was serendipitous. Do not underrate accidents. There's an entrepreneur has an idea, he finds you, they get together. Now, on the second part of your question earlier, you had the OPEC Development Fund was here, right? Well, email them, man. If you want to create a fund that's going to do multiple investments, that's an E&Co model. If you want to do a solar company, a Cellco model, I say, hey, this is what I want to do. If they don't answer you, then email them again and again and again and again. Why are we put? That's called tenacity, man. This is not rocket science. One of my messages is, and I think Hans made the same point, this is not hard. This is easy, but it's hard work. You got to connect the dots, man. All right? And just be an absolute pain in the butt. And eventually they'll answer you.
An exclamation mark here, Sarah from Egypt.
Hello, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
In Egypt, there's a slum called Hayat al-Zabbalin, which is the trash collectors' quarters. Yeah. Beyond just collecting trash, people who live there also use the trash as fuel.
Yes.
And this produces carcinogens and causes many diseases amongst the population. A social entrepreneur actually created a solar-powered oven that can help these people. But unfortunately, cultural differences prevent people from adopting this solution. They're educated about the problem, but it's too much work for them to implement this solution. So how can we overcome these obstacles?
Well, I think the most important relationship in an energy enterprise is the relationship between the entrepreneur and the customer. If you go on our website, one of the things, not our website, the Columbia University Garage, we have this whole formula where enterprise meets customer. And there are 4 characteristics of that customer that have to be met. There has to be a demand. You've said now there's knowledge, but there's no demand. I'm going to give you the sum of 64 years of wisdom. You cannot push a string. You can pull a string, but you cannot push it. And so maybe that's not the right technology, not responding to the knowledge base. Maybe it's not responding, but the demand comes from the customer. It doesn't come from the entrepreneur. It doesn't come from well-intended people. It doesn't come from the folks who's shipping money out of Washington through it. The most significant relationship that has to be built is between the enterprise and the customer, and the entrepreneurs in the poorest countries of the world are the largest untapped resource we have at our disposal. We've spent 50 years and trillions of dollars flowing money from Washington through London, a little turnaround in Paris, hits the capital city, and by the time it gets to the local delivery entity or the customer, we're lucky if there's 5 cents on a dollar. turned the paradigm for the last 60 years on its head. Concentrate on the customer and the person who lives in that neighborhood as the energy entrepreneur, and you'll be amazing what solutions will be realized.
We have the next question by Rani from India.
Okay, and this I believe will be the last question, correct? I'm checking.
Okay.
I've been chastised. It's all right, madam.
Mine is not a question. Mine is an answer to that guy's question, who questioned about the sugar cane and the energy. I'm from Siemens, India, and I myself have done a project where the sugar cane was taken and the sugar was taken out, and then the energy was produced, and it was a 13 megawatt project, and we are extending it to 30 megawatt.
No.
So he can come, and maybe if anybody else wants similar kind of project,
Absolutely.
we can
Processing sugar cane, taking the gas, using it as fuel. You can do all of these things, not all of the time. I think the gentleman here was referring to more of a biofuels debate. Because sugarcane, do we have time for one more question? Of course, he says. Oh, I've now figured out the technique here.
Hi, I'm Javier Leiva from Spain, and I work in a project called Smart City Malaga. We are building a sustainable energy model. And I would like to say to my fellow delegates, especially for those coming from developing countries, that let's take advantage from current knowledge about energy, and let's build sustainable energy models based on renewable sources, electromobility, diversified energy mix to face future demands and do not repeat the errors we committed in the past.
Well said, well said. Okay, it's Philip Larocco, P-H-I-L-I-P dot L-A-R-O-C-C-O. No, it's not up there, that's him. At ianco.net. I'll give you another name. Hopefully she'll be here next year with you. Her name is Jenny Green, Jennye dot Greene, and she's also at ianco.net. And thank you.
Do you see, guys? Do you see? This is a master class in where money and capital from the capitalist system and government, sometimes corrupt governments, this is where this all comes together with the needs of people. This is where ideas change people's lives. But it's pulling these moving parts together, okay? Needs clever, clever people like Phil, but like me, Phil is getting old. You are the clever, clever people, but that was a lesson in put the pieces together and contact Phil.
And solve my problem, by the way. I gave you a problem. Yes, darling.
Okay, chaps, I tell you what we're going to do now. We have a little bit of change of schedule because we started late this morning. Okay, so the next session that is up is Women Up. So I would ask you to be back. I just want to make a point about the sessions, particularly the plenaries. The reason that a plenary is called a plenary is it means that everybody has to be there. Why does everyone have to be there? It's the only thing I hope we have that is a little bit like the United Nations. The United Nations has a plenary session. That means all the countries are in there for the voting. So what are you voting about? The resolutions and the call to action. The resolutions and the call to action come from the returning ambassadors. That's where they come from. That voice is maybe last year's ambassador's voice, but it's your voice, okay? So you being in the room to comment on that, vote against it, abstain, absolutely vital. I know it's lots and lots of work, okay? So if I could ask you just plead one more minute of your time before you go, and we've got sandwiches for you out there. I know you're hungry, but that's not lunch, then there will be lunch, okay? So you'll manage. I just want to say one thing. You know, everybody's tired and working incredibly hard and trying to get things done and getting frustrated if you can speak or you can't speak or they don't speak about what we want to speak about and all of this stuff, okay? I get stressed, David gets stressed because we try to make everything really amazing for you guys, and you know this. I just wanted to say just a moment of sanity. We're here to talk about the world and the world that you live in and how your futures are going to be, and can you find a way to make the world a better place. This morning we talked about corruption. We've talked about Egypt. We talked about the spark that Tunisia was for Egypt. We know that what's been happening in North Africa has its results in the democratic process, but we know there has been suffering on the ground. Now, David has a rule for me. I'm not allowed to cry at One Young World, okay? So I'm trying hard not to cry, right? I just want to tell you, there are 2 children here today from Libya. One of them's brother is fighting now in Tripoli for her country's freedom. The other one has lost 20 family members. They came to me to tell me their story. So I'm going to ask them now to stand up. They're both crying, but I want you to remember, this was the result of corruption that didn't get fought. That's why you're here. That's the change. Come on, girls. This is Rania and Butul, okay? Don't look at me and the people up here, okay? You, fix this, fix this.
Okay.